Okay, at this point, we have talked about the basics of narration and we have selected our topic for our personal narrative. So, before we dive in on actually writing and drafting that, let's just take a minute to review those basics, the three major parts of an essay. Now, pretty much everything I'm going to hit here should be refresher, but it never hurt to recover something that it's maybe been a while since we thought about. Okay, so we've got our three major parts of an essay. We've got our introduction, we've got our body, and then we've got our conclusion. Let's talk about it here. Okay, our introduction, this is our very first paragraph of an essay. It's our introduction. It's going to provide our background information. It's going to be broad and general. And nothing that we're going to hit in the body should be in our introduction. And this introduction, we need to make sure it doesn't just summarize what's to come in the rest of the essay. It's just serving as our hook. Okay, so within our intro paragraph, we've got three basic parts. We've got our hook, we've got our background and our setup, and then we've got our thesis. You've probably seen this represented as kind of an upside down pyramid. We start broad with our hook. This is what we do to get our reader interested. This might be an anecdote or a memory or a strong quote, something that's going to grab our reader right off the bat. Then from there, we're going to give some background and our setup. We're going to start building towards that actual essay, and then we'll end our intro with our thesis. So this is kind of what is the theme or takeaway that we're going to get from this narrative. Our hook, think of it as a lure, get our reader's attention. It should be interesting, and it should be something that everyone can identify with. So we don't want to knock our potential readers out of being interested with something super specific that maybe people couldn't connect with. So we want to try to connect to a wide audience here with our very beginning. So let's look at some examples. No one expects a treasured friendship to end in hatred. Okay, I'm interested. What happened? Give me the details. A person can literally die of a broken heart. I'd keep reading. That seems like an exaggeration, but if you've got a story to tell me, like, I'm here to read that. Happily ever after is a load of garbage. Okay, that's a strong idea that really engages you and wants you to continue reading on. Student loan debt is indentured servitude. That's a hot take. Tell me more. Any of these hooks would have me as the reader wanting to continue. Then we move into our background and setup, and this tells me everything I need to know to understand what is coming later in the essay. No spoilers. Don't tell me how it's going to end, but you might give me the background. I might need to know who the characters are, where the town is, why it matters that there is a festival on the third Saturday of October. Those sort of details that are going to be really critical as we get into the narrative. Shouldn't write this first. This is very likely something that you're going to need to fill in after you've kind of seen where the essay takes you. And we want to be really, really careful that this does not overlap with the rest of our essay. It's redundant and not interesting to read the same thing over and over. So we want to make sure that we keep this separate from the meat of the essay that we're going to hit in our intro. Our thesis, this is that one sentence that tells me the main idea of the essay. Now, this is not a three-pronged thesis, despite what all of your high school English teachers have drilled into you, and which you may hear from me and other places. This is not what we want in a narrative essay, okay? We do not need, this is what happens because this, and this. This is not the place for a three-pronged thesis. Those are training wheels, and they work with very simple essays. And is formulaic good sometimes? Yes, but this is not the place for it. So really challenge yourself not to rely on this three-pronged thesis to set up your essay, because we're telling a story, not making an argument. So it's just not the right spot for it. Okay, here's that triangle I mentioned earlier. With that hook, we're broad and general. With that background, we're setting it up. We're getting more specific. And then we're narrowing right down to that thesis where we're going to be the most specific. Then in our bodies, this is the most important. This is where we tell our story. Some basic rules here. Each paragraph should only talk about one thing. You can have as many paragraphs as you need. Again, this is not a super formulaic essay. You have space to be a little bit creative and tell the story that you want to tell here. So, new topic should mean a new paragraph. Now, how you are going to organize these paragraphs is going to be dependent on what your purpose is and the way you're telling it. Body paragraphs, like intro paragraphs, should also have these 3 basic parts. And let's look at those. So, okay. I've lost my cursor. Okay. The 3 major parts of the body paragraph. We've got our topic sentence, we've got our supporting details, and we've got our transition sentence. Every body paragraph should be set up pretty much like this. Again, it may be a little formulaic, but there's not a problem with having structure. And relying on structure and formula can actually be a really good strategy for someone who is maybe not a very confident writer. So the topic sentence, that's essentially the thesis, but for that specific paragraph. Not the essay as a whole, but that specific paragraph. And this is going to tell us what is the main point of that paragraph. This should not just be a statement of fact, but it should be something that you will support or prove. And that's going to be that first sentence of your paragraph. So you're going to introduce that topic, what you're discussing in that paragraph. Then you're going to go on with those supporting details. And these are going to prove the point you just made in the topic sentence. This fills out the rest of the paragraph. It should be several sentences worth, and it should be concrete and specific. You're going to use lots of details here. And then you're going to wrap that up in the last sentence of the paragraph which is your transition sentence. And that's going to connect your previous body paragraph or your current body paragraph to the next one. So not only was that restaurant dirty, it also smelled bad. Sadly, that was not the last time I would fall on my face that day. Those are some examples of transitions to kind of wrap up what you were talking about and move you into the next idea. Okay, so our body, we've got that topic sentence that's narrow and specific and focuses our paragraph. We've got our details, that's the meat, that's the big chunk, and then our transition, which is a specific connection to that next paragraph. And then we wrap it up with our conclusion. And this is a mirror of that introduction, although sort of flipped upside down. Because we're going to start our conclusion with that restated thesis. That same idea that we ended our pyramid in the intro with, just in different phrasing. This is going to wrap up any loose ends. And this is also really important in our personal narratives here. We're going to give some terminal closure with the same kind of language that we used in the hook. So for example, if we said happily ever after is a load of garbage in the hook, here we might say happily ever after just might be possible after all, because that's going to connect us to that beginning, but it's also going to show us the growth that you achieved during the course of that story. But it needs to stay cohesive. So we want to pick up that same thread. Okay, so here's that upside down. Restated thesis, wrap it up, and hit me with that terminal closure that connects back to your thesis and gives me that idea that you learned something, you grew, you were changed. Okay, so this is kind of what our essay should be like. We start broad and we focus in, and then we explore our topic. We explore our topic. We explore our topic. We restate that thesis, and we wrap it up with that terminal closure. Okay, I know every one of you has seen this before. You should probably know that it's free text pyramid, but even if you didn't know that, I'm sure it looks familiar. We've got that kind of plot chart that you have done in every English class since 5th grade, most likely, that you've had to plot the events of your story. You've got your exposition or denouement at the beginning, and that is where we introduce and set the scene for the story. Then let's see if I've got a good. Oh, no. I'm trying to spotlight here. That's not working well, so ignore that. Sorry. I was trying to get fancy with that. So then we move into our inciting incident, and this is the thing that kind of sparks the action. What gets the ball rolling in our story? Then we build that rising action. And of course, we're going to hit a complication. This is that conflict that we talked about in our previous video. We build to the climax. Then we've got a reversal. We find something happens to go against that complication. Then we've got the falling action, the resolution, and the denouement here. So we've got our exposition to start, and then our denouement to wrap it up. So as we would do here, we'd have our intro paragraph as that exposition. Then our 3 or 4 body paragraphs are going to take us from rising action to climax to falling action. And then we're going to see the denouement as the conclusion of our story. Okay, in that narrative introduction, remember we're going to hit the background. Tell me what I need to know to understand that story. The thesis, which is that lesson that we learned, that should be broad enough that anyone can learn from it. Car maintenance is important. Not, my car needs a tune-up every 400 miles. Remember we talked earlier about not wanting to be overly specific. A really strong suggestion is don't write the introduction first. Now, you may have an idea of what that thread that you want to weave throughout, how you want to hook. Write that down. Jot those things down. Do some pre-writing, but don't lock yourself into an introduction first, okay? See where the story takes you, and you can always go back and develop that intro. Okay, narrative body. With this, again, we have a lot more flexibility with this because this is a personal narrative. You can have as many body paragraphs as you need. I would say you'd be hard-pressed to tell a story that's going to meet our expectations and get the job done having, less than probably 4 or 5 body paragraphs. But I can't speak to your story. Each paragraph should contain a conflict. Each conflict should then lead directly into the next conflict. And then that biggest, most dramatic, significant conflict should happen at the final body paragraph, and that's the climax. In that narrative conclusion, you're going to tell me what came next. You're going to wrap up your loose ends. You're going to give me that moment of reflection that tells you how and what changed over the course of the story. Okay, so let's look here. Some conflicts in Shrek. Okay, let's see how we'd organize the body. So a first body paragraph here might be conflict 1. In Shrek, we see that, he's just chilling in his swamp, and then all these creatures show up, and that's a problem. And that's a problem that propels him to action. So this would kind of be that inciting incident. This is what pushes him into action and gets the plot moving. Okay. Conflict number 2. Well, I just came here to tell you to get all of these creatures out of my swamp, but now you're sending me on a mission. Well, that is another problem that has to be solved and is sending me, Shrek, because I'm writing this as a personal narrative and we're writing about ourselves and our own experiences. It's sending me on this mission. It's sending me into action, and it's propelling me forward in my story. Okay? Oh my gosh. I was just going to get the princess, and now there's this fire-breathing dragon that I must endure. So now I have to solve this problem by fighting this dragon, and that's moving me forward in my story again. And if you notice, it's moving chronologically. I'm not flashing back. I'm not jumping around in time. It's a sequence of events that unfolded. A fourth one. Oh my gosh, this princess is a brat. She's so difficult. It's a problem. And it's a problem that I have to deal with as I am returning Fiona to Farquaad. Again, it's pushing me to action, and it's propelling the story. And then we've got the princess is getting married to someone else. After all of this, now Fiona is marrying Farquaad, and that is a problem because things have changed. We've grown and we've developed and we've learned things along the course of our journey. And now here's yet another conflict, perhaps the biggest conflict of them all that I have to resolve. Okay, so then my conclusion would reflect on how this was solved and how I changed over the course of this journey and how I was once just a disgruntled ogre who wanted to sit alone in my swamp, and now look where I am after all of these challenges. I am here happily ever after, because even ogres can find happiness. Okay, so you see how you're going to just kind of follow those sequences of events in a logical way. Focus each body paragraph focused on one specific event. I wouldn't want to have lumped a couple of those in together because it's not giving due time to explore. Okay, so now that you have your topic and we have reviewed how to set up and format our essay, it's time to start our outline.